What is up, everybody? Happy New Year. Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Hope you had a wonderful New Year's Eve. Hope you have an even better New Year's Day and an amazing 2023 in general. Let's start off things with a Packers victory over the Minnesota Vikings. That would certainly be a nice way to kick off the new year. We're going to be going over the keys to the game as we always do. But before we get there, a couple roster moves that I wanted to talk about. First of all, kind of some bad news, I guess, to end the year. Nothing devastating, but Micah Abernathy signed off the practice squad by the Atlanta Falcons. He gets to move to their active roster. So certainly good news for Micah Abernathy. I don't think this is going to be one of those moves that we look back at in a couple of years and are like, man, really regret that the Packers didn't elevate Micah Abernathy and give him a chance on the team. I do think it's somebody that showed some promise. Had he been a rookie, I think this would have been a little bit more of like, man, I think maybe they missed out here. He's been in the league a few years now and, hasn't had the opportunity to really showcase himself. I do think when he's had opportunities in Green Bay, specifically in preseason, he's made the most of them. But good signing for Atlanta, and we'll have to kind of just monitor that moving forward to see if that's something that ends up kind of biting the Packers a little bit. I think ultimately he's probably a back of the roster type player. But again, really happy for him. And like I said, we'll kind of keep an eye on that move moving forward to see what he ultimately does with the Falcons. Meanwhile, Packers elevate two players for game day. Not necessarily the two I was expecting. They elevate Ramiz Ahmed, the kicker. And this makes some sense, right? Because Mason Crosby has struggled with kickoffs. His leg's just not the same. And the Vikings boast one of the best kick returners in all of football in Kene Nwangwu. So this is a real opportunity for Ahmed to utilize his leg and hopefully minimize the damage that Nwangwu can do on kick returns. So that makes some sense and is a pure logistically, strategical move for Green Bay. And then Tyler Goodson's a little bit more interesting, right? It could be bad news for Aaron Jones. I don't think that that's the case. They could be covering themselves a little bit in that way, but I don't think there's going to be a major role for Tyler Goodson as a running back in this game. Even if Aaron Jones doesn't play a snap, all of those snaps are going to Dylan and Patrick Taylor, right? So I don't see that. Instead, rather, I think this could potentially be bad news for Keyshawn Nixon. Remember, Goodson did kick returning in preseason. This could be a move, especially with Watson being questionable. I don't think they're going to want to put Romeo Doubs back as a kick returner like they did last week. You don't want to all of a sudden lose Doubs to an injury on a kick return, and now you're without Watson and Doubs, or Watson's at least not at full go, and now Doubs gets hurt. So my guess is they protect Doubs a little bit and don't put him as the kick returner. Like I said, this to me would lean itself to Goodson potentially being a kick returner on game day, and possibly even if Nixon goes, right, maybe they want to utilize him on defense, and maybe they don't think that he has the full burst and capability as a kick returner. So maybe he's active, but Goodson's the kick returner. We're just going to have to wait and see as to what the inactives bring. But don't think this means anything for the running backs. I think this could mean more for Keyshawn Nixon as a kick returner, and maybe that they don't use him in that capacity. So don't know for sure, not reporting anything on it, don't have any inside information, but that's just what I would kind of glean from those moves. But we'll certainly know a lot more when the inactives are announced an hour and a half prior to game time. But cool to see Tyler Goodson up on the roster. He was a really fun player in preseason, and if he is a kick returner, I'm excited to see ultimately what he can do. Would be a bummer if it's not Keyshawn Nixon, but either way, at least get to see a fun, exciting returner in Tyler Goodson. All right, that brings us to our keys to the game, 10 keys, and what I ultimately think will be a very close, very entertaining Packers-Vikings game. Number one, the key to the game is Christian Watson, and I mentioned this yesterday, and I don't think it's hyperbole. I do think if Christian Watson's able to go and how he plays is maybe the biggest key in this game. He has single-handedly transformed this Packers offense, and you could even argue this Packers team. They don't win that game against Dallas without Christian Watson, bar none, like his 3-touchdown game. They lose that game to Dallas, and then remember they lose the games right after to Tennessee and Philadelphia. Like the season's dead right there. Like it's over, it's done. And yeah, they have the Bears and the bye, the Rams, Dolphins coming up, but all their postseason hopes are out the window with the loss to Dallas in that game. So he saved their season, but like more than that, right? He's just been a transformational player for this offense. As I've said before, the exact player that they needed with the exact skill set at that exact time, his explosive ability, his playmaking ability, his ability to stretch the field, to take double coverage down the field, to open things up underneath for other receivers, to be able to hand him the football, just do so many different things with him. He's a huge key to this offense, not in just in this game, but to their offense moving forward for the foreseeable future. And if they don't have him in this game, that changes everything drastically. And we saw earlier this season, when this offense hasn't had Christian Watson in, they struggle to move the ball. Single safety high press man-to-man on the outside has been an absolute nightmare for this Packers offense to try to navigate without Watson. And, one of the only ways that they've been able to do that at times has been with Aaron Jones, and Jones hasn't been 100%, right? So it's a recipe for disaster if Watson can't go, or if he's not himself, not 100%, etc. Or at least if he's a shell of himself. If he's even 75%, you can get something out of that and he can still help your team, even if he's just drawing coverage, if nothing else. But man, if there's no Christian Watson, that just changes up this game entirely. And I very much believe in that scenario, it favors the Vikings in a very major way if there is no Christian Watson, or if he's just not himself. Number 2 is Kenny Clark. Garrett Bradbury is out for the Vikings, even though Kenny Clark has eaten Garrett Bradbury's lunch on more than one occasion. Their depth along the offensive line just isn't that good, and that is a matchup that Kenny Clark has to dominate. He is a Viking killer. He has been extremely well. He's played extremely well against the Vikings throughout his career. The Vikings, I know for a fact, are ever cognizant of Kenny Clark and where he is and what he can do. And now they have to go against him with a backup center. And I've said it a million times before, this defense goes as Kenny Clark goes. He's been playing better as of late. The defense has been playing better as of late. If he can wreak havoc from the inside of this interior, of the defense or the Vikings offense, it can help basically kind of crumble their foundation, because everything starts with Dalvin Cook. And if you can't get Dalvin Cook going, especially in between the tackles, that's going to make things harder. Preston Smith's been setting a really good edge on the outside. You could argue that that's going to make things extremely important for JJ Enagbare on the other side, because I'm sure they're going to test him. But if you can't run inside, and if Kenny Clark can be getting pressure into the backfield and just kind of bench pressing the center back into the quarterback, it's going to make things extremely difficult on Minnesota and Kirk Cousins. You know that Cousin, or really any quarterback, doesn't want immediate pressure coming from right in the interior of the offensive line. And if that's happening and Kenny Clark's whooping his man up front, Green Bay is going to have a real legitimate shot to win this game and keep their playoff hopes alive. So watch Kenny Clark early, watch Kenny Clark often. I know it's really hard to take your eye off the ball, but if you want to watch something early to see how this game is going, see if Kenny Clark's dominating on the inside. And the other thing too is, if Minnesota's cognizant of it, if they're constantly double teaming Kenny Clark and he can't get going, then watch your Devontae Wyatts, your Jarran Reed have a back-to-back, huge performances like he did last week against the Miami Dolphins. Anybody else is going to have to step up in that scenario. Their tackles are good. O'Neal and Darisaw are both very good. You have to win on the interior. And if they're doubling Kenny, it's just going to be so important that whoever it is on the other spot on the defensive line, whether it's Jarran Reed, TJ Slayton, Devontae Wyatt, they're going to have to be extremely disruptive. So all of that's going to be worth monitoring. And again, this is going to be a huge game for Kenny Clark. Number 3, I talked about it with Mike Wall, or more specifically, Mike Wall talked about it, but the play action game for this Vikings offense. And we just kind of set it up a little bit, right, with Kenny Clark and stopping everything on the interior of the defense, but starts with the running game and Dalvin Cook. If he starts getting going, then the play action game gets going. And all of a sudden now, Quay Walker, Devondre Campbell, these safeties are more cognizant of Dalvin Cook in the running game. And now you're getting advantageous matchups with Adam Thielen, TJ Hawkinson, and that Justin Jefferson guy too on the outsides. And that too can be a recipe for disaster. So the Vikings play action attack is one of the best in football. As Mike mentioned, they will attack with it, not just over the middle of the field, but they will attack downfield with their play action game. We've seen just recently this past week where wide receivers are able to get in the secondary. Adrian Amos is really struggling with his foot speed on the back end and sticking with wide receivers. So that is an area where Minnesota can attack. Green Bay's going to have to be better than they were in week 1 and they were last week against the Dolphins. Or if they're not, we're going to see some extremely explosive plays from this Vikings offense. And you just can't have that. That's not going to be a way that Green Bay is going to be able to get out of this game with a victory. Number 4 is, and we sort of touched base on it in number 2, but No, I lied. We're going the other side of the ball. Sorry, I'm thinking tackles versus edge rushers, but this time we're going the opposite side of the ball. So David Bakhtiari and Yosh Nijman versus Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter. So you look at this matchup, right? And I just want to go over the defensive front for Minnesota against Green Bay's offensive front from week 1. Zadarius Smith, was dominant in that game. Dalvin Tomlinson, Harrison Phillips, those guys, especially Tomlinson, had an amazing game. You go back and watch that game, and I mentioned it with Mike Wall the other day. Starting offensive line for the Packers in that game was Yosh at left tackle, and then you had John Runyon Jr., Josh Myers, and then Jake Hansen and Royce Newman. All right? That is a entirely different offensive line than what Green Bay is going to be playing with. And now having Bakhtiari and Jenkins on the left side of that offensive line. And then Myers, Runyon, and of course Yosh at right tackle, where I think, again, he's been playing better at right tackle than he ever was at left tackle. So that is a massively improved Packers offensive line. And the hope is that as much as, Hunter and Z and Tomlinson and Phillips and those guys have been dominant all year long and beat up the Packers offensive line in week 1, that this offensive line is going to be able to hold them in check much more than they were in week 1. That is a matchup that Green Bay not just needs to do a better job with, but they need to win. Zadarius and Danielle Hunter on the outside cannot just get pressures and dominate and set the edge and all of that. I think Bakhtiari is going to be able to come back and look like Bakhtiari. I'm not concerned about that. Every time he's in the game, he is helping the Packers win football games. So that should be one that you feel a ton better about. And it's that other one, Yosh Nijman at right tackle. Like I said, he's been better over there, but there's still times where he can get beat clearly. And whoever it is, Zadarius, Danielle Hunter, Yosh is going to have his A game. And he's coming off a bit of an injury as well. So that is going to be a matchup to watch on the outside. Number 5, Aaron Rodgers is going to have to be able to attack this Vikings secondary. And whether it's with Christian Watson or without Christian Watson, this is probably the weakest point of this Vikings team. I know they have Harrison Smith back there. I know Cam Bynum doesn't get near the attention that he deserves, but this is still a cornerback group that is susceptible and that you can win against. And even with a Romeo Doubs and even with, Randall Cobb, Alan Lazard, I don't care who it is, there has to be a way that Green Bay can attack this Vikings secondary with efficiency. Aaron struggled last week against Miami. It just is what it is. He needs to play better against Minnesota than he did against Miami, and he needs to have a comeback performance. And really, if Green Bay wants to have a chance of getting in the playoffs and winning these 2 games, and if we get a Washington loss against the Browns, and Green Bay actually wants to make some noise in the playoffs, then again, this has to be a better version of Aaron than what we've seen as of late. Not saying he's been terrible. Certainly that's not the case, but he's been far, far, far from the MVP, not only candidate, but winner that we've seen the last 2 seasons. So this is a big game for Aaron. Have to be able to attack this Vikings secondary. Part of that is a responsibility of the receivers, the tight ends, the running backs, his offensive line. It's not just a one-person game, but Aaron, when he has those opportunities, has to take advantage of them. He's got to be able to see the field clearly and rip the ball when there's those opportunities down the field. So big game for Rodgers in this one. And then 6, we'll just take it really from last week. I said it last week. I think Green Bay got away with it in winning a game despite losing the battle of it, but that's the red zone. Green Bay was awful again in the red zone last week, and it could have bit them and cost them any chance at the playoffs. The defense stepped up, gets 4 turnovers, basically from the end of the second quarter into the second half, and that was the difference in the game. They don't get those turnovers, you're going to, really look back and lament that you weren't able to get more points in the red zone against Miami in a game that you probably lose. Offensive, whether it's, I don't care if it's the offensive line, the tight ends, the receiver, like this offense just has to be better in the red zone. They have to find a way to get better point production. It can't just be creativity, right? We've seen Green Bay run some creative stuff in the red zone. That only gets you so far. You have to be able to knock players off the ball and get in the end zone with A.J. Dillon. You've got to be able to open up against a Viking secondary that, quite frankly, is not that good. You've got to be able to get Robert Tonyan in advantageous matchups, which is not going to probably be the case against Hicks and Eric Kendricks and Harrison Smith. But you've just got to find a way to get players open, to get separation, to block up front, to knock players off the ball, and be a bit more of a physical team in the red zone. If you're not, you can only scheme up so much. There's only so many sleight of hand plays that you can run before the other team is just like, you know what, we don't care. We're just going to punch you in the mouth and go get the quarterback or go get the running back, right? So Again, they're just going to have to be better. They're going to have to be more physical at the point of attack, and they're going to have to get better separation. If they don't, red zone issues are going to continue to happen, and it's just going to be points that are lost over and over and over again. So watch for the red zone in this one. Number 7, have to make Kirk Cousins move. He sits in the pocket and stands there and just has time and the space to deliver. We know Justin Jefferson's going to get open. We know Thielen is going to get open at times. We know Hawkinson's going to get open. There will be tight ends and receivers that are open against this Packers secondary. They're going to probably play a lot of zone coverage again, and it can work, but it's only going to work for so long, right? If Kirk Cousins is just able to stay in the pocket and be a pocket passer and not get off, he never has to get off of his spot, it's just going to be a super long day. They're going to put up points on points on points. So you have to get him to move. And it might be easy to say, like, oh, you got to get sacks. No, I don't even care. Like, it doesn't even necessarily have to be a quote unquote pressure, meaning somebody's like up in his face and getting him off his spot. Even if he feels the offensive line coming in and collapsing in front of him, if it is a pressure, if it's a edge rusher coming off the edge, which just makes him move a little bit up in the pocket, whatever it is, just watch Kirk Cousins' movement in this game. If he's consistently moving, that's going to give Green Bay an opportunity to win. If he's just stationary in the pocket and just boop, 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 he's got the accuracy, right? Kirk Cousins' issues have never been with accuracy. It has been when he has to go and make plays outside of the pocket, and sometimes, obviously, some mistakes will come off of that as well. Also, he has struggled in primetime games, which this isn't quite, but it is like a national game. Like 95% of the country is seeing this game, so maybe he'll struggle in this one. But he's had a really nice season, and he plays phenomenal when he doesn't get off of his spot. So got to get him to move, and can't just let him sit in the pocket and pick apart this Packers defensive backfield. Number 8, which Quay do we get? I thought Quay had probably his worst game of the season last week against Miami. We've seen some really good stuff from Quay. We've seen some really bad stuff from Quay. This is a Vikings team that will attack the middle of the field, that will attack the communication at every level, deep in the secondary, as well as in the intermediate passing game as well over the middle of the field. We've seen Quay and Devondre not pass off things correctly on those little drag routes. We've seen Minnesota really likes those. We know that the tight end, TJ Hawkinson, is going to be a big part of this game plan. We know that Dalvin Cook is going to be a big part of this game plan. So you're talking about passing over the middle of the field, covering a really talented tight end, and stopping a really talented running back. Devondre Campbell, Quay Walker are going to be heavily involved in this game. And I can promise you, Minnesota's going to look at that game tape from last week and say, we can attack Quay Walker. And they're going to go after him. And how he responds in this game is going to be absolutely huge. Super talented, and we've seen some really big-time plays from Quay Walker, but we've also seen the rookie headlights. I think he's hit a little bit of a rookie wall as of late, and you can just constantly see him thinking out there, and that's an issue. If Quay is thinking, he's a step behind, or a lot of times he's misdiagnosing, going in the wrong direction. If he's not thinking, meaning that he's reacting, he's instinctual, that's when you can see that speed and that athleticism show out. More importantly, too, he's got to do a better job of holding up at the point of attack and shedding blocks, something he's struggled with all season long. Minnesota's going to run right at him. That's why Kenny is so important that we talked about earlier. If Kenny can keep these linebackers clean and, they're forced to double Kenny and that leaves Quay or Campbell open to go make a play, that's awesome. That's all, well and good, but you have to go make the play. You can't just sit back and sort of react to things and see what happens. You see that hole and you see, Cook with the ball, go make a play. You are a first-round pick, University of Georgia, SEC. You have the ability to play at a very high level. Green Bay needs that out of you in this game. This is a very, very big game for Quay Walker. Number 9, the reemergence of Darnell Savage. We don't know for sure, at least I don't know for sure, if he is, in fact, reinserted in the starting lineup, if that means Rudy Ford is back to the bench or playing more of a special teams role, or if he's just going to be more of the, dime defensive back. It could mean, if Keyshawn Nixon doesn't play, I think we probably see Ford and Amos at safety with Savage in the slot again. And then, of course, Douglas and Jair Alexander on the outside. I think that's probably the biggest thing. But if Nixon is active, then is Savage starting at safety next to Amos? Whatever the situation is, I do think we're going to see more of Darnell Savage in this game. I thought his last game was one of the best games he's had in a while in limited playing time, but he said all the right things, and I've heard all the right things all week long. First of all, the Packers said that he was a consummate professional, a pro's pro, in handling being benched. And it sounds like the message got through. He was big play hunting constantly, out of his spots, not making the routine plays, not going up and tackling the way that he should have. He did everything last week in almost every scenario of what was asked of him. And I saw the most disciplined Darnell Savage that I saw in a very long time last week. And if the message is through to him, I've said all along, even though I've been extremely hard on Darnell Savage, I have not lost faith in Darnell Savage's overall talent ability. There is still something there. I know I don't want to bash the guy in the week that he came back and signed a one-day contract and retired as a Green Bay Packer, but with Clinton-Dix, I had at the end of his Packers era, that last year-ish before he was traded to Washington, I had completely given up on Clinton-Dix. I didn't think there was anything left, and that really played itself out. He struggled in Washington, he struggled in Chicago, was just never really good again. With Savage, even though I was just as hard on Savage as I was on Clinton-Dix, I never felt like this was a player that couldn't be successful in the NFL. You see all the flashes. He just had to put it together and play more disciplined football. If the benching got that message across and we see a better Darnell Savage moving forward, a Savage that you can win with like we saw in 2020, that completely changes this Packers secondary and completely changes the outlook of that safety position as you head in to 2023 because he's on a guaranteed deal. You were thinking of like, how the heck do we possibly get out of this? Do we attach a draft pick to him so somebody takes him? Instead, if he can finish out the season strong and have really nice games against Miami and then, finish strong against the Vikings and the Lions and maybe in a playoff game or two, like that changes your secondary entirely moving forward. So I'm really hoping that this is a bounce back, career changing event for Darnell Savage and we start seeing a much better player than we did earlier in this season. And then last but not least, number 10, should not be surprising to anyone, Justin Jefferson. I could not have been more disappointed, is probably the best way to put it, in Green Bay's week 1 plan against Justin Jefferson. As I mentioned at that time, you had all offseason to plan for Justin Jefferson. This is a player that is going to be a pain in your side for the foreseeable future. Justin Jefferson's not going anywhere. He's going to be a Viking for a while. He's going to be probably the highest paid wide receiver in football, and you're going to face him at minimum twice every single year. You have to have a plan in place to shut him down, and if that plan doesn't work, you need to have a plan B, a C, a D, an E. You need to throw the kitchen sink out until you figure out a way not to stop this guy. You're not going to stop Justin Jefferson, but to contain and control him as much as possible. And that could not have gone more poorly in week 1 when he went absolutely off against Green Bay. That starts with having a secondary that can competently communicate with one another to make sure that they're not allowing Justin Jefferson, wide open in the secondary, deep down the field on multiple different occasions. That's not a way to control and contain Justin Jefferson. That's handing him a red carpet to 200 yards receiving. So it starts with the fundamentals. You have to communicate. You have to be in the right spots. You have to be covering your right zone. And you also have to throw different things at him, whether it's pressing with Quay Walker or a linebacker, a bigger defensive player like we saw against Tyreek Hill on the interception play where Quay Walker jammed Tyreek Hill at the line of scrimmage, throwing off a little bit of the rhythm of that play. Tua overthrows him, Jair gets the pick, and that's a game-changing play on that. Whether it's, letting Jair Alexander trail him in man coverage with the safety over the top, whether it's just flat out 2 corner. We're going to put Rasul and Jair on him. We're double covering him. It's 3rd and 14. We're going to make darn sure that Justin Jefferson is not getting this ball. Whatever it is that you need to do, you have to find a way to contain and control him as much as possible. He's going to get his. And if he ends up with a 8-catch, 95-yard game and a touchdown in this game, I'd be like, okay, you can win with that. You can win with Justin Jefferson having a normal human, really nice day receiving. You cannot survive another 9-catch, 200-yard, 2-touchdown performance, basically, like he had almost in week 1 against Green Bay. That's not a recipe that you can win with, and they're going to have to be much better against Justin Jefferson in this game. Those are my 10 keys. What do we get from Christian Watson, if anything? Kenny Clark, play action game, play action defense more specifically. Hunter and Z versus Bakhtiari and Nyman. Rodgers being able to attack this Vikings secondary. Red zone offense, red zone defense. Make Kirk Cousins move, get him off his spot. Which Quay Walker do we get? Do we get a reemergence from Darnell Savage, and can he pick up where he left off against the Dolphins? And then trying to contain Justin Jefferson as much as possible. I'm going to go Packers 24, Vikings 21 in this game. I think this is a legitimate coin flip. I could see this going either way. As mentioned, I think Christian Watson plays a massive role in how this game ends. If he's playing and he's active and he's good, I think Green Bay's going to have a real chance to win. If he's not active or he's just not himself, I probably lean Minnesota in that situation. But knowing what I know right now, meaning I don't know if he's going to play or not, I'm still going Packers 24, Vikings 21. Thanks so much for joining me. Again, Happy New Year. I hope you enjoy hopefully what amounts to a Packers victory to kick off the year. I will see you guys right back here tomorrow to break down the game. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.